Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vulnerability Hangover. I am your host, Nikki, and Enzo is in the room with me, but he doesn't want to sit next to me right now for whatever reason. So he's laying on the bed, but he's here. Today, we are going to be talking about birth control. You're either on it or you're not. And I wish I wasn't. I'm back on it again. But before we get into the episode, I do want to start off with a affirmation. The affirmation for today is I am confident, I am powerful, I am unstoppable, I am unbreakable. That affirmation doesn't really have anything to do with this episode, but it is what it is. Also, drink of the day is water, because if you listen to my last episode, I let you know that I had kidney stones. So be sure to stay hydrated, and we're going to take a sip together. All right, let's get into it. I have been on various forms of birth control. I have had the IUD several times. I've been on the pill. I've had the patch. And I've tracked my ovulation. Not very good, but honestly, that's the reason why I got the Aura ring, because it was easier to track your period that way. I was off birth control from 21 to now 27. In that period of time, I was just tracking ovulation. Why am I back on birth control? We'll get into that later. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with birth control in the first place. My first form of birth control was Yaz. It was the pill. I was on that from ages 13 to 18. The whole reason I got on it was from my psychiatrist. It was supposed to help with period symptoms, I believe, like PMDD. Not that I had that, but I was having severe PMS and for clearer skin. Looking back, I'm like 13 years old. You got a lot of hormones running through your body. Of course, you're going to have PMS. You're a teenager. Teenagers are hell raisers, and they're very difficult. And I don't necessarily think they should be on any medication, but that's just my opinion. It is what it is. I had a very good experience being on the pill personally. I know Yaz is kind of a controversial one, but I knew that eventually I would have to get off of that form of birth control and try something new. We had a family friend who was on the pill for a prolonged period of time, and she actually ended up having a stroke, which can happen if you're on the pill or certain forms of birth control for a long period of time. Also, I believe you're more prone to it if you're older. I could be totally wrong. I am not a doctor. But that kind of scared me. And so at 18 years old, I decided that I was going to go and get the IUD. This was my first experience with having the IUD. And I mentioned earlier that I've had multiple IUDs put in, and that is true. The first one that I got inserted, I honestly don't remember which one it was, but I had it inserted at Planned Parenthood, and it was so fucking painful. Like, it was a constant cramp. It felt like I had to poop the whole entire day. I don't know why. It just was like so fucking painful. And that very day, I had my mom drive me back and we took it out. And then it was back to the pill. That was my experience with my first IUD. But when I turned 19, I was out living on my own. I obviously was sexually active. I had a partner at the time. And I felt it would be easier because I was so depressed and it was hard for me to take my medication. I felt that I should just go and get the IUD. And this IUD I remember was, I believe, the Mirena. I think that's the hormonal one. Either way, it was a hormonal IUD. And that was inserted by my gynecologist at the time. It was still extremely painful, but I pushed through it. It was painful for a little less than a day. I had pain management afterwards, but I ended up having that IUD in for about 6 months. The reason why I ended up getting it taken out again was because, one, it gave me severe acne. After having pretty much no acne to very little acne from ages 13 to, I guess, 19 years old. I was very insecure about how my skin looked, and I was like, "How am I 19 with acne all over again?" Of course, skin goes through its own situation, but the hormonal acne made it even worse. I also bled for 6 months straight on the IUD. I don't know if that's normal. In some cases, I have seen on Reddit, on the birth control forum, that people have also had this experience and you just have to tough it out. But I couldn't do it. I was starting to become anemic. It was just not fun. I don't like bleeding for prolonged periods of time. I don't think anyone does. I ended up going back to my gynecologist and I explained to her the whole situation about how I was getting severe acne, how I was bleeding for prolonged periods of time. And she was like, "Oh, that's kind of normal when you're first getting on the IUD, especially because you've never had a kid." Because a lot of people, after they give birth, they go and get the IUD put in. She was like, "We can take it out today and replace it with something different," which was the copper IUD. Now, the copper IUD does not have any hormones in it. It literally is just inserted to kill the sperm, because I think copper kills the sperm. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know these things. But that was also a disaster. That was the first IUD that had migrated. Yes, it migrated. I don't know if it was because of my gynecologist or just because my body can't take the IUD. There was basically no point of having it in. I had to go and get an ultrasound done to confirm that it had actually migrated because it was making sex so painful. It was honestly uncomfortable, and I still continued to bleed. They confirmed with me with that ultrasound that it had migrated. So I had to get it removed, of course, because there's no point of having the IUD in. If it's migrated, you could end up getting pregnant that way. And then I believe I switched back to the pill for a short period of time, but then I started to see another partner at the time, and he, for some reason, wanted me to get on the IUD. I think because he had other partners that were on it, and he just wanted to be 100% sure. Newsflash, no birth control is 100%. Hate to say it. But anyways, I go and get the IUD placed. It was super fucking painful. She said that I was basically able to have sex that day, so we did. And I'm pretty sure that is what made the second one migrate. Super uncomfortable. I could feel it every day. It was really weird. It was painful for my partner at the time because he could feel it. And I continued to bleed again for several months straight. So finally, I got fed up and I went back to the pill, I believe. So I was on the pill for a prolonged period of time. I started to forget to take the birth control, and I ended up just switching over to the patch. The patch, I think you leave on for like a couple of weeks and then you take it off for whenever you have your period. And that was great and all, but I'm allergic to medical adhesives, so it was giving me a rash in like a little square. And I was just fed up at that point with being on birth control entirely. I'm like, we can switch to condoms and I can just track my ovulation. And I will admit, I didn't know how to track ovulation until I was, I think, 25 years old when I got my Aura ring. I did not know that you had to take your temperature. I did not know anything about my cycle, quite honestly, because they don't really teach you it in school. We were just kind of winging it, my partner. I would, quote unquote, track my ovulation. You can kind of tell when you're ovulating too, because it's like sometimes a week or two after your period and you just feel amazing ovulating and everything. And I felt so much better being off birth control. Although I can't recall any of the changes that I had being off birth control and if there was any real differences, but I do know my periods were a lot less heavier. They eventually regulated to like 5 days instead of 7 days to 2 weeks, which was really nice. I honestly prefer to not be on birth control. because when you're getting pumped with hormones, it's just not a fun experience, and having to remember to take the pill is not a fun experience. But not a lot of guys out there have vasectomies, and a lot of them don't want to wear a condom. And I'm not saying that I have not been doing that, but it always gets put on the woman. I'll just say that. So, unfortunately, at 23 years old, I believe I knew that I was ovulating at the time because I could kind of just tell, when the vibes are good, when you look good, you feel good. I ended up getting pregnant. You guys know what happened. I have an episode about my pregnancy termination. It's one of the first 10 episodes. After that, they tried to get me on the NuvaRing, I believe it's called, and I just refused. I continued to not use birth control, but also at the time, my partner and I were being way safer, and we weren't really having a lot of sex, so it made it easier for me to not worry about getting pregnant. Fun fact, though, about ovulation, pregnancy, and Plan B: if you take a Plan B when you're ovulating, it doesn't work. Also, if you're over a certain amount of weight, it doesn't work. So, just a heads up, I honestly don't think there's any point of taking a Plan B at all. You just got to be safe. Track your ovulation. There's a lot of ways that you can do it, and I know that now. So, you may be wondering, why am I back on birth control? Well, let me tell you. I'm back on birth control. I made that decision because of the economy that we're in. I don't really know what is going to happen. I do not want to have kids in this economy. I'm not ready to have kids. And I just want to consistently have clear skin. Although I go back and forth a lot with if I want kids or not. That's really sad to say because I know in that pregnancy termination episode, I talk about wanting to have kids and like wanting to be a mom. But the older I get, I'm just like, I don't know if I want to have a kid. And if I'm 27 right now, thinking that, because I thought I would be married and have kids by now, I might change my mind and not end up having kids. Like, I'm so back and forth with it. But I'm also single, so I don't really think about that too much. So this is going to be a pretty short episode. I apologize. My experience with being on birth control is pretty cut and dry. I explained everything that I could remember all the way back to 13 years old, but I do want to talk about my experience being back on birth control. My first 2 weeks being back on birth control was absolutely hell. I felt like I was going insane. I was crying all the time, and I was angry. I got angry at the drop of a hat, and I honestly considered not taking it anymore, but I stuck it out. It's been a month now, and I finally feel like I've regulated. I also switched from one pill pack to another. I went through a service called WISP, and they provide you birth control pretty easy. You don't have to go through your doctor. But I wanted to go back on Yaz, and they ended up giving me a different one called Nikki, which is ironic. And now I ended up going through my primary, who knows me in and out. And she was like, yeah, now that you are 27 years old, you probably need a different form of birth control to adjust to your hormones. And she explained to me that now that I'm older, my body needs more estrogen, whereas when I was younger, my body needed more progesterone. So she put me on a different form of the pill called Haley. And honestly, I've been having pretty decent experience. My first period was really awkward. It didn't really feel like a period. I was like spotting for a couple days before, and I apologize to anyone listening. This is going to be TMI. My first like real period lasted 2 days, and it didn't feel or look like a period. So that was interesting, but that was my first one. Who knows what it's going to be like on the second one. I also did start the pill on the third day of my cycle. So I was still bleeding at the time, and it ended up basically slowing down my period, and I was spotting, but it evened out. I don't know how long I'm going to continue to stay on birth control. I mainly got on it for clear skin and not wanting to have a kid. So it's probably going to be for a while. But you never know. One day I could just be fed up with having to remember to take the birth control because it's hard. You have to take it with food, and sometimes I forget to eat breakfast in the morning. So if I don't eat it with food, I get nauseous. It's just frustrating. So eventually I have a feeling I'm going to end up going back to tracking my cycle and being way more smart about it. You still got to wear a condom because you never know. You can still get pregnant when you're not ovulating. It's just a lower chance. But the whole reason why I got my Aura ring, which is this big ring on my ring finger in the first place, was to track my ovulation. And there's certain apps that connect to your Aura ring so you can track it and like see when you're ovulating based off of your temperature that it takes. But the best way to find out if you are ovulating is through a thermometer. So you know your temperature. I'm pretty sure. I just kind of let my Aura ring tell me when I'm ovulating because it can show you, hey, this is the week that you might get your period. Hey, this is the week that you are ovulating, and so on and so forth. My advice for anyone who is considering going on birth control, it's totally okay to switch the methods if one is not working out for you. I went through multiple methods. I went through the IUD, the patch, the pill. I was supposed to be on the NuvaRing, but I never ended up doing that. There's also different ways to prevent pregnancy. Being with someone who has a vasectomy, wearing a condom, of course, although you should be wearing a condom regardless, especially since syphilis is on the rise right now. Wrap it up. Also, go and get tested. Please go and get tested. While you're getting your birth control, it's easy to do. They take your blood, they take your urine, you self-swab, whatever it may be. That's important. Sexual health is super important, and I am not afraid to talk about it on this podcast. I think that it's something that should be talked about more because I know our education system sucks, and it's just been trial and error for me, and I never really understood half of the things that have to do with sex, your body, STDs, pregnancy, tracking your cycle, all that stuff. It's very complicated, but listen to your body, advocate for yourself when it comes to finding the right doctor for you, finding the right gynecologist, whatever it may be. I do want to add one more thing before I sign off. I am a month on birth control, and I have noticed I have no desire sleeping with men. I'm like not attracted to them right now. So I don't think it's necessarily killed my libido, but I definitely think it's probably changed my taste in men. So there's that. But I would like to know, what is your guys' experience with birth control? Have you had a crazy journey like mine? Leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys for listening to this short episode. I hope I got my point across. I'm back on birth control. It's been a wild journey, and I'm figuring everything out. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and I will catch you guys in my next episode. Okay, love you. Bye.